What's up, Campus Life fans? It's Lane here in the Miller Waldrop Studios today to bring you a very special edition, sort of an emergency broadcast here for the Guns Blazin podcast, episode number 23. As always, I'm one of your hosts today, and alongside me for today's episode is Mr. Logan Wilson, back from Oklahoma City as he was with the Texas Tech softball team. Logan, it's good to have you back, man.
I appreciate it. It's been a while. Yeah, I've been on the road for quite a while, runners up for the second year in the row. Obviously not how we wanted to finish, but you know what? Going to Champ Series was amazing. But yeah, this is a very special episode. We've been talking a lot about it, and some big news came out this morning regarding Texas Tech football.
Absolutely. It's been a crazy day, to say the very least. Probably one of, I wouldn't even say probably, this is one of the biggest stories in the history of college football. And we're going to be discussing all things about Brennan Sorsby, kind of the whole timeline of everything, and now kind of what to expect moving forward as he has been granted eligibility. His injunction has been granted by a Lubbock court by Judge Ken Curry, who he might have to have an honorary jersey here in Lubbock. And, of course, Brennan Sorsby's attorney, Jeffrey Kessler, put on a masterclass at that court hearing. But before we get into all of that, first off, we just want to thank y'all for tuning in to every single episode and following us and subscribing to us on all of our social media platforms, whether you are seeing our content at the Guns Blazin podcast or Campus Life TTU, and as well as thanking all of our sponsors for the Guns Blazin podcast with Roof Masters of Lubbock. Fans, obviously, it's been storm season. There's been some pretty bad rain over this past couple weeks or so. If you have any type of roof damages, make sure to check out Roof Masters of Lubbock. And then also, of course, we wanted to thank our sponsors with JSI Industries and the Exceptional Community Hospital here in Lubbock. I think we can kind of, knock out the injury report segment right here. Fans, it's time for this week's injury report, a special injury report presented by the Exceptional Community Hospital. And before we hop in to this injury report, we just want to take a moment to recognize the Exceptional Community Hospital as a proud sponsor of Campus Live and the Guns Blazin podcast. And be sure to visit their 24/7 state-of-the-art hospital and ER located at 6401 Spur 327 in Lubbock. They accept all insurances and have short ER wait times. And once again, the Exceptional Community Hospital is proud to support this week's injury report on Campus Live. Logan, he's not on the suspended injury report anymore. He will be for the first two games, but a massive win today for Texas Tech football, having one of the best quarterbacks in the whole entire country granted eligibility. Of course, we would imagine the NCAA is probably going to appeal this, but if it gets appealed, it's going to go to a circuit court in Amarillo, Texas. And 4 of those judges are Texas Tech grads. I think it's pretty safe to say that this thing is over, unless it somehow got to a congressional hearing, Supreme Court. I don't see that happening, Logan, but massive news today.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah, this is big news for Texas Tech football. Obviously, coming into the season, you had Brennan Sorsby transfer in for a large amount of money, and he was seen as the guy that was going to take the next step for Texas Tech football. Obviously, we'll talk about everybody who's listening knows what had happened, all the reports on the gambling incident as well. But I think the biggest winner of this is Will Hammond. And he will now get the entire season to redshirt and now recover from the ACL injury. Reports were that he was going to be pushed back and have to be ready to go in arguably week 2 or week 3 of this season with no quarterback, with Sorsby out. Now with Sorsby back in the fold, now Texas Tech now has those same aspirations and expectations that we had when we first got him, and it's big news. And you're right. With the appeal process, we have seen track records of appeal processes taking extreme amounts of time to get finalized. And if I had to guess, that won't be solidified until after the 2026 season. And after that, does it really matter? No.
Yeah.
The season will be over. Texas Tech season will be over. He'll be moving on to the NFL. The NCAA needs this gone. They need this out of the media as soon as possible. But, yeah, keeping the villain arc, I guess.
Absolutely. It's, this is what we've been waiting on ever since really the end of April. And we'll kind of take you through the whole timeline of this whole entire deal. Obviously, at the end of April, Brendan Sorsby is announced as a gambling addict who was entering a rehab treatment facility. In the original news, it was over 10,000 bets. We found out he bet on his own team. We didn't really know much else. We had talked about it on the podcast. We had gave him a 1% chance.
I think I said no more than 5.
Yeah, no more than 5. I think that was kind of everyone's reaction to it. But obviously, he enters the facility, and there wasn't really any more news besides the fact that he hired Jeffrey Kessler to be his attorney. Talk about a legend now in Lubbock. Mr. Kessler, he's had huge cases, before. He's the one who basically passed the clearinghouse for revenue sharing for NIL. So he now has probably the 2 biggest wins in NCAA history as far as, court cases go, having the NIL clearinghouse in his favor, and then now having Brendan Sorsby, who bet on his own team over 40 times, eligible for next season. Jeffrey Kessler, man, he's maybe the best sports attorney in the history of court law, I guess.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. He has now 2 of the most polarizing cases in college athletics, and could be the sole reason for the downfall of the NCAA.
Seriously,
this is one of those cases that could dismantle the NCAA, as now they have no power over their number one rule that they have always been able to really enforce. We've seen it numerous times. The last podcast that I was on, we talked about it, but not being able to enforce this rule is bad news for the NCAA.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you come to find out that Sorsby, later on in this process, he was gambling on things such as Romanian soccer, hot dog eating contests, really kind of everything under the sun. And this truly was an addiction for him.
100%.
And, obviously he claimed that all of the bets on Indiana football were in a non-detrimental way. And it came out that they weren't ever to lose, or he never bet against his own team, players-wise or anything like that. And Sorsby and his legal team actually informed the NCAA staff that they revealed no integrity concerns with the bets. And the NCAA actually agreed with that filing and most of the stipulated facts that were in that case given to them by Kessler and all of his attorneys. Obviously, then it kind of moved on to the case, the injunction hearing, because the NCAA did deny his appeal for eligibility twice. And you saw, on social media, everyone's like, oh, Sorsby's done this past weekend. But in reality, the injunction was what was going to decide everything. And the original judge in the case was Judge Phillips, was a Texas Tech grad. He removed himself from that case. And then you saw, obviously, Judge Ken Curry, who is from Fort Worth. I'm pretty sure it was a Houston graduate.
Yeah, he's a Houston law grad, UT Arlington.
Undergrad, or UT Arlington undergrad, right? Yeah. So he had no ties, to Texas Tech in that regard, as, he's not an alumni. And I was actually at this court hearing, and I have some statements that I gathered from that we can kind of run through. And really, it was kind of a clinic by Mr. Kessler in this case. He talked in his opening statement for about 45 minutes. The NCAA really only responded for 10. Their side is pretty point blank. He broke the rules. He should be punished. It was obviously Mr. Kessler had to make the case for his defense to win the injunction. But really, the big key point in Mr. Kessler's case for Brendan was that the NCAA, according to their own bylaws, cannot disparage their own athlete if they are diagnosed with a mental health condition. And Brendan had a doctor at his treatment facility diagnose him with not only a gambling addiction, but with also an anxiety disorder. And it's pretty clear in the NCAA bylaws that they cannot disparage an athlete for that. And he was pitching, obviously, that defense to the judge. And we'll go through some other statements here, but I think that was kind of really the clear one, Logan. What's kind of some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that, the NCAA probably, when they initially wrote that, didn't expect that this would come out of it. But yeah, he was clinically diagnosed. And then I think one, off your statements as well, following the case, is that the NCAA tried to say that he wasn't medically diagnosed, which had already been proven and shown that he did indeed. And so maybe a bad defense strategy on their part to try to undermine a clinical doctor at that point. They had some interesting things, that they tried to touch on. But yeah, you're right. The NCAA's case was pretty, to them, cut and dry. He gambled on his own team. That's the death penalty in college athletics. We don't really need to say anything else. And it turns out that they did need to say some other things. But you're going up against one of the greatest attorneys that you'll see in sports law, like you pointed out. And the NCAA was not prepared for a judge to really take into account everything that he went through. Probably was expecting, okay, he's going to be deemed ineligible, and let's move on.
Yeah, and one of the statements that Mr. Kessler had made in the beginning of his statement was that the NCAA's gambling policy is not absolute, and it has a reinstatement process, and you can be reinstated. And he stated that, I think, multiple times during the hearing. So obviously the NCAA, they even stated in that they were worried about that other athletes could just go find treatment, right? And they could claim that they have an addiction. But I think, Brennan's case is way different than the other cases you've seen. He had over $90,000 in bets over a 4-year span. It was over 10,000 bets in total. Clearly, he had a true addiction, and he had a true diagnosis, which Logan just talked about, from a clinical doctor. And when the NCAA in the court case had kind of pushed back on that, Mr. Kessler and the defense later on in the hearing said, Mr. Askew was the attorney for the NCAA. He said, "You are not a clinical doctor. You cannot claim he does not have an addiction whenever there is a true statement from a clinical doctor that he did have an addiction." And kind of like you said, the NCAA really didn't have a response to that besides the fact that, he gambled on his own team. He should be punished for that, which, based off what we've seen, he probably could have been. But I think this case was a little bit different just based off of the volume of Brennan's bets and kind of everything that's come out since then. But I think really where Mr. Kessler won maybe the judge over, he waited till the very end to reveal that there was an Indiana volleyball coach who bet over 700 times and over $300,000 in bets, did not bet on his own team, but he bet on other Indiana programs such as football and basketball. And the NCAA decided that he should complete meaningful sports betting education and then only suspended him for 30% of the season. It's kind of the similar punishment we're seeing here for Brendan. Obviously not from the NCAA, but from obviously the court in Lubbock County. But I think Jeffrey bringing that up at the very end, the NCAA had no response to that in the closing statement. So I think that was kind of the final knockout in that whole deal. And once again, him even finding that case, I never even heard of that case before he brought that up, just kind of speaks to how good he is at his job, Logan.
Yeah, he had numerous articles submitted evidence to the point where they call it a recess, I believe, so that the judge could receive all these articles of evidence from Kessler and Sorsby as well. You're right. It speaks to how good he is at his job and how good his counsel was at finding not only evidence, but evidence that supports the case specifically to Sorsby. And yeah, you're right. Sorsby was in a completely different realm of case that the NCAA had never been, those lawyers had never been a part of anything like this. And it proved in court, and it's going to be very interesting to see how this ruling affects future athletes as well. And, if you're an Iowa State guy, I know it's a totally different case, but, if you can see some of these guys, maybe, if there's no 5 for 5 yet, sue for the eligibility back. There are some things that could happen because
they were freshmen, right?
Yeah. So they should be, a couple of them would be still on their 5 for 5 year, even if that does pass later this summer. But it's super interesting. It's been a crazy case to be a part of in our own backyard.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, I think this probably is the final nail in the coffin for the NCAA for them having any power
They have none.
because they
Have
have none
none.
now.
They have none.
They lost all their power in the clearinghouse case for revenue sharing. They're, I mean, think of any other case that have the. I mean,
I don't even know of a
what
case
case
they've
have they
won.
won?
Yeah.
Like a big case, you
I
know?
think the last case they won was the Bediako appeal.
Right. Yeah.
That was, because he was deemed eligible for a couple of weeks, and
Yeah.
then they win. I guess it was a different kind of appeal process, an
Yeah, because
expedited one.
his was a temporary
Yeah,
restraining
temporary
order.
restraining
Right?
order
Yeah.
against them. Yeah, so that was the last thing in court that they've ever had a win, and that's because he was a pro. Like,
Yeah.
that was the only way they won that
They
one.
they lose the Chambliss case
yes.
earlier this winter too. I mean, if you really want to get down to it, I mean, he really had no eligibility left. Trinidad didn't.
No,
And
no.
he played that full season at Ferris State, and they claimed he had an injury, and kind of.
It was a sickness, right? Missed a couple of weeks.
Yeah. So.
And he got a whole year out of it. So I don't know. Now you have the president of the NCAA asking for congressional help after this case. It's a bad look for the NCAA, but the athletes will never collectively bargain, and I don't blame them.
Yeah.
And the NCAA has no power, so it looks like I don't even know if there's an answer for the NCAA. College sports is going to be its own entity, and it's going to be mega conferences probably at the end of the day that have to bargain together. And would not be shocked if the SEC and the Big Ten start trying to weasel their way out of the NCAA in the coming years. Actually, not even years, in the coming year.
Yeah. And in this filing that was obviously put out today that was granted, it is stated in there that Brennan has to follow a 6-step program through, I guess this whole entire season. Obviously, he has to continue his clinical counseling with, obviously a provider for his gambling disorder. He has to participate in peer support through a Gambling Anonymous. He has to also continue treatment for his anxiety disorder. Fourth, he has to participate in athlete-specific recovery resources and mentorship as recommended in the report. And then, of course, he is not participating in the first 2 games of the season. He was suspended for Abilene Christian and at Oregon State to open the season. Abilene Christian, that one, I mean, kind of what at Oregon State, we'll see. Obviously, Oregon State was not good at all last year, but never know. But only missing 2 games, one of the biggest wins in the whole entire, obviously, process of this whole entire deal in the history of the NCAA. And Texas Tech now has their Heisman Trophy candidate quarterback back at the helm, and Texas Tech is going to be the villain of all villains in this college football season, Logan.
Yeah, just add it to another sport that's now the villain. I was a part of arguably the biggest villain in college softball. Yeah, it's just something Texas Tech has dealt with since the NIL process, or NIL, has opened and the floodgates have been let out. Texas Tech taking full advantage. I think one thing about this case that really didn't bring up is Kessler's response this morning about how the judge took their recommendation of, yes, he deserved to be punished, but 2 games was the thing, and he accepted that. Just shows another thing of, man, this guy. Maybe adding the, hey, let's suspend him 2 games. We don't expect him to be completely cleared is something that was added. I don't know. I'm not the judge. But yeah, I just thought it was pretty interesting that they took his exact recommendation, and that is the final ruling. But, Bill and Ark, like I was talking about, we all talked about it.
And Brennan, in his statement on social media, he agreed that he should be punished for his gambling addiction, but just not for the whole season. And that's what, Mr. Kessler and, his team built their case off of that. Yes, he believes he should be suspended, but he should only be suspended those first 2 games, and then he comes back for that Houston game.
Don't give us 3 games. Yeah. We need 2.
Yeah. So Brennan, he will be back for probably, I would say, obviously 1 or 2 most important games on our schedule next season, because Houston is going to have a really good team next year. if I didn't even know this until I kind of deep dived into them a few weeks ago. Do you know they had the 7th best transfer portal class in the country this past offseason?
I know Mekhi Hughes is now the starting running back at
Yeah,
and come from Oregon. He
And-
didn't play there,
yeah.
but no, they got some talent. They were already good last year. They had a little bit of a surprising year.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're gonna be good.
They returned Wegman to a quarterback, and I mean that's Friday night prime time here in Lubbock. Brendan's going to be back. That game is going to be crazy. There's every news outlet in the country is going to be here for that.
Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of free two signs out there. Yeah, it's gonna be. I'm thinking now you just amplified the Cincinnati game too. You know, all of this. They already had all this problems, with him. Now he's reinstated. Perfect time for him to head on to Cincinnati and take on the Bearcats. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be a fun season to see all the outside noise and how it really affects this team and see how built they are. And Joey's gonna have his hands full with some of this.
And that'll kind of move us into our paving the way to victory segment. Fans, JSI Services is a proud partner of Campus Live, and be sure to visit their website at jsiservicesllc.com to learn about their asphalt/paving services, earth and dirt works, concrete and gutter paving, crack fill, seal coating, and stripping services. And thank you once again to JSI Services for their proud support of the Guns Blazin podcast and Campus Live. Logan, it is now, obviously, he has his eligibility back. What do you think now with him being eligible and suspended those first 2 games? Now what are kind of, I guess, some keys to victory for this season now moving forward?
So originally I thought you were going to lean in a lot on the run game, especially with him being out. The three-headed monster you have in the backfield this year was going to be the focus. They will be the focus the first 2 weeks of the season. But now adding the dual threat ability of Brendan Sorsby now opens up the wide receivers again. Now you're going to see the wide receivers that all offseason were getting all this shine and hype around the program. They get their quarterback back. Sorsby adds just a new level of athleticism and experience to this team. They will now be able to throw the football downfield as well as add his mobility. I think the offense now becomes, again, the centerpiece of this team. When once he was out, you kind of were going to lean more on the defense again this year. But I think now you're back to what you expected. Start coming into the season, score a lot of points, and not allow a lot of points. And that's a recipe for success, not only in the Big 12, but with your future plans in the CFP.
Yeah, I think, this is going to be now back to being one of the most talented offenses in the whole entire country. And seeing the fact that, we didn't really know what his health was going to be. Obviously, an immensely talented player and quarterback, but now he is, he can rest, and you can start, either Kirk Francis or Lloyd Jones for those first 2 games, probably Kirk Francis, and you can lean on the running game. You can obviously win those first 2 games. Obviously, you're going to have a top 10 defense as well, probably once again in the country. But like you said, having Brennan back into the fold, I mean, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. It's why you paid him $5 million to come be your quarterback. And, we've been so worried that he wasn't going to be a part of this thing, and now today we find out he is. It's crazy. That's
an understatement.
From the first day this came out to now, if you would have told me that he was only going to be suspended 2 games, we would have thought you were crazy.
Oh, I still think it's crazy, Yeah, 2 games sounds, a little insane. I was thinking that 4 to 6, half the season. But, I'm not going to complain.
Not going to complain. And that'll kind of wrap things up here in the Miller Waldrop Studios. Thank you, fans, for tuning in once again. And make sure to follow, like, share, and subscribe wherever you see all of our content on Campus Live or the Guns Blazin podcast, as well as thanking all of our sponsors once again for their continued support of Campus Live and the Guns Blazin podcast. And lastly, remember that Campus Live is your one-stop news source for all things Texas Tech and Lubbock. Welcome.